Yeah, so basically the context of this is basically there was a viewer that came into my comment sections about the video I made about Charlie Kirk. We had some disagreements about efficiency concerning the vegan diet, so we decided to talk about this, and this is what the footage is.
My comments on YouTube were, half of them are basically like taken, like not taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, oh, well, why doesn't veganism rule because it tastes good? You know,
Yeah.
which technically is a point, but not one I would go to like Charlie Kirk about.
Yeah, for sure.
But do you have any goals or anything you want to like establish
Yeah, so I guess we should
beforehand?
establish the definitions of what we're talking about. When you were commenting, you were talking about the efficiency of veganism, which I sort of argued from the comment sections that veganism is going to be more efficient, which you had different responses to that. So could you like clarify what exactly your position on that is?
Yes. So one of my jokingly comments, I want to know, is wool considered vegan?
I would say not because of the wool factories or the way the wool is produced in most of the societies is going to be immoral.
Okay. I do have some context. I also for like during COVID for like my part-time work, when you can't work in like restaurants or service industry, I did work on an alpaca farm where we did have you know what are alpacas good for? Shearing wool. And the alpacas were not mistreated. That's a personal anecdote. Also,
Mm-hmm.
alpacas are very fun animals. They hate people though. And another thing is so when I say veganism is not like efficient, I'm talking from like a grand scale. A what if 100% of all human beings did it? As someone who's also
Right.
a personal trainer, as like a side hustle, so I have to do some like education. I gotta pass like a test and to get a sheet of paper with my name on it to say I'm legit.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean I'm like a dietitian or I'm like a scientist. It just means I know enough just to do my job.
Right.
And from what I know is veganism can work depending on certain factors. So some people will say like, "Oh, but there's no proteins in plants." Well, you have incomplete proteins. You can eat a bunch of incomplete proteins to complete a protein. It's
Right.
difficult, and you have to know what you are doing. So if you are not educated on what to do and you try to go vegan, you're going to fuck yourself up.
Yeah, so a quick point about that is that you get the mass majority of the amino acids and things like that if you just consume about like maybe even 100 grams of ceton a day, maybe even less than that. And ceton gives you like 70 grams of protein per 100 grams, along with every single amino acid, except for one in particular. I forgot the name of it. I'd have to look it up. And you just have to
I
eat
forgot
like
most of them too.
beans
Don't
or
worry.
rice or in order to get that other amino acid. Because when we're talking about
Yes,
complete proteins, I'm assuming you're just meaning proteins that have enough amino acids and all the amino acids, right? That's what a complete protein would be.
the technical definition, as far as I remember, again, I am folly to be incorrect at two, and we have no like fact checker, but there are 20 essential amino acids that make a complete protein,
Mm-hmm.
and a complete protein has all of them put together, which you know animal flesh tech is famous for, or most like eggs are a good source of complete protein too.
Yeah.
But
So I guess we do have the
there's
same sort of definition of what a complete
yeah,
protein is. So I don't think that's going to be a big deal because what was it? Ceton provides for all of those except for one.
correct.
So I don't think
Now,
it's that difficult to get all your proteins in order to
correct.
be vegan.
Now, another thing too that I tend to see with vegans is their reasons for being a vegan are not a dietary reason, but a morality reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this also goes into like why the debate, sorry, not the abortion debate always stems into morality. My argument is not a morality reason. I'm not gonna say that like, oh well, killing animals is not always wrong from a moral standpoint.
Yeah.
It can be, one of my points I mentioned before was like, do you kill the humans or the animals? But I'm looking for if a can the whole world do it, and can we
Um.
still like function? or we could say just America. As I said, I live in Japan right now. It is currently 11:33 a.m. and the Japanese their primary food source is fish. Because when you're on an island, you're gonna eat what you're gonna,
Yeah.
you don't have the most options, and they do have a bit of a rice shortage right now, which is also their secondary food group. But okay, I think we've established everything.
Right. So it's not
I
really about the morality.
I
It's more going
give
to be
you
more about whether or not the people will be able to do this and be able to consume a vegan diet without getting sick or something like that, right?
yes. We'll look for practicality, the
Right.
on paper, on paper in practice arguments.
Yeah, so the main problem and the main contention I have with that is just going to be it's going to require so much more land in order to grow the crops, in order to feed the animals. They consume about 10,000 calories per day. We have to grow crops which we could consume, or we could use that land in order to grow crops for us, namely corn and soy, instead of feeding it to the animals. So off the bat, I think it's
There's
just going to be less efficient if we continue to grow cows and stuff just for the consumption of their meat.
there's also alfalfa, which is another big point that I used to live in Idaho, and if you drive near, people say Idaho is like the potato state. Well, I mean, Washington grows more potatoes, by the way. But if you drive like from Boise up to like Northern Idaho, you'll see like rows of potatoes and rows of alfalfa. The alfalfa is used for the cows.
Right. But I feel like
And
if
you
we
house up. Go
go
for it.
ahead.
Also, you also have like hay.
Right.
That those bundles of useless shit that we feed our horses.
Correct. Yeah, so I can send you studies if you want and research done on what the farms feed their cows. The vast majority of factory farms just feed them grain, which mainly consists of soy and corn. I can send you that and back it up if you want me to. And then the other thing about hay is we could just use that hay or the land the land we're using the hay for and use it in
Okay.
order to grow something to feed us.
Okay. So yeah, you'll be first send me those after this because I'm not gonna like spend like 20
Yeah.
minutes just to go. Give me a moment. To Okay. So here's my first question. Do you think veganism is more of a modern time luxury? And what I mean by that is, let's say we're like in 1500s Renaissance England, or even better, the Dark Ages, or the time of Jesus. Do you think people could have been vegan back then?
No, because the vast majority of proteins need to have some sort of alternative source. Then certain supplements too. But I wouldn't say
Okay.
veganism is a privilege because it's cheaper to be a vegan overall.
Okay. Well, at least back then, we would say it's impossible. And this goes back to like part of the practicality point is we have a culture defined by food is the best way to like describe a
Right.
culture. Like when people go to Italy, they think of pasta, for
Exactly.
example. So you have people who are raised, historically on the idea of eating meat, and it goes back to that one joking point. Meat does taste good. From a practicality standpoint, can it be done? I think it's possible. It would require a whole lot of cultural reworking and a whole lot of what's it called like changing the entire agricultural industry. Which how practical would that be realistically? It'd be very hard to do, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we do it overnight. I'm just suggesting we do it over a period of time. Like there's some
Oh,
reforms that we've made in society, such as like reforming the architectures of certain cities and certain towns, and that took a lot of resources. But the amount of output we actually got from it would make up for all of the input we did.
okay. And just to clarify, you do believe veganism is more of it's a moral reason, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, in that case, what would happen if someone broke those morals?
Um, you
As
mean
if
like in a
let's
vegan society we have like certain rules? If somebody kills an animal, they would get
yeah yeah,
punished.
yeah, let's just say like dad and son go on a hunting trip together.
Hmm. I guess we would have like some sort of form of punishment, I guess. Like we have forms of punishment for murder, for example, and rape and
Yes.
things like that. So I
Oh,
guess
be
there
careful
would
with
be
that.
some level
Careful with
of
the R word. If you're trying to
right, I have to
record, YouTube does
censor
not
it.
like that word.
Now I have to
Yeah.
like look halfway in the video and just find where it is. Yeah, but
It's yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, but I would generally say that there should be some form of punishment because in order to enforce some sort of moral code, you'd have to enforce some level of punishment. But I also want it to
Okay.
be like people want to go vegan. People want to stop harming animals. People don't sort of have that incentive to go out and kill deer for food.
That partially goes into like that first joking point of the again, we're going for practicality is we have a culture again, if we had like let's say 200 years ago, probably couldn't do vegan. You have generations of, of people not being vegan. And like you've got like media, and I say media is like the most popular way to experience culture. Also, side note, when you said Disney is also like trash, I thought, oh man, when the vegan hates the Disney stuff, but that's who they're trying to appeal to. Oh, that's gold.
Yeah.
But the okay, so like for example, let's say I watch like an old western, and westerns tend to be like based on historical ideas. You see like the Clint Eastwood or whoever, and they're eating like a steak because back in like Texas, in that desert, they're gonna have like their main food source is meat. So you're gonna have people who think, "Wow, that steak must look so good," and that's gonna kind of create the idea of like, "Oh, well, I want to try that steak." And if you're trying to push like a real shall be vegan for moral reasons, you have to kind of go back to all these films or just all these media and portray this as a bad thing. Like, oh well, you know, let's say like, oh well, back then, slavery was not really considered as immoral, and now it very much is. So we have to like kind of look at all this media and change that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I feel like we're doing this with the America specifically, with George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, people like that. We're more portraying them as people who not necessarily were the most moral people out there. Like they owned lots of slaves and stuff like that. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, and I think it can be useful when we're educating people about how slavery is actually could be a bad thing. But I feel like there's more efficient ways to do that, like by telling people this could be wrong, but that doesn't mean every single person that was in this film is in the wrong and they're like horrible people.
Okay. But yeah, we do have a culture again already of again like say fantasy or whatever. People like to eat meat in those medias because that's what they grew up on, and they would say it's delicious.
Hmm.
Because again, you want people to not be vegan, but meat tastes really good. I don't know if
Right.
you were like you've had meat before, but
Yeah, it tastes good.
you weren't always vegan. Yeah, so you had to convince people that it is better for like society to not eat meat, to give up the idea of this delicious meat flavored versus the how does the fish feel?
Right.
But again, in Japan specifically, there's other regions where this applies to. Just I live here, so I can speak on this. If everybody became vegan, the culture would be screwed. Everyone would be screwed. They do not have enough plant-based resources to survive on just plant diets alone. What do you say to that?
They predominantly survive with fish, right?
Correct. People think it's rice, which it is, like they're secondary, but as of right now, they currently are having a bit of a rice shortage. I don't know the full numbers on it. I just, hear the hearsay from the locals. So I've got no sources to cite unless I want to really like look into it.
The
But
locals. Do they grow any like beef over there? Pork is that popular, or do they just get it all imported from like China?
I don't know the trade customs of Japan. I just know that. So you can take the bullet train. You've heard of that before, and you can go across the country. Beautiful countryside, by the way.
Yeah.
You will mostly just see rice farms. I haven't seen like big ranches. I would assume they probably do have some chicken. I do know that beef's a little bit more expensive, so probably not as there's not that many like beef ranches. I would say that they might import some of it. I don't know, but I do know that fish is cheap. You can get
Right.
like good nigiri sushi at some like cheap sushi place for like I got like one piece with the fish on top about like 150 yen, which is about like a buck 15, if that, or like 80 cents per one sushi. So, and that's just the rice and the fish.
Right. Yeah, so I think there's going to be some imports that you're going to get for some foods. And if there is like ranches out there for like chickens and cows, for example, we could just replace those farms and the places where we grow food for them with just more plant agriculture in general. And if there's just a bunch of rice farms, I feel like those rice farms, if I'm right, use the same kind of agriculture to grow soy and things like that, which is going to be more nutritionally adequate for people.
I have no idea personally about the about too much agriculture. I know little bits. I did know about what they gave cows, the cobalt B12 supplements, which are not good for people. That was actually part of my studies.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole thing about
But
the B12 thing, the middleman reference is just like we could harvest that labor and all of that money into getting B12 supplements that are just going to be synthesized. I'm not saying we should give humans cobalt or anything like that. I mean, I
no,
get if you got that
that's a good
impression.
idea. That's why I thought I went this guy's high when I heard that.
Yeah,
You do make one good point about the tariffs. Again, I will always concede points if you make a good point.
right.
Like in terms of efficiency, I didn't want to use like the Trump tariffs as a like, oh, we can apply now because that's very new and I don't know the ramifications of that still. Because if you listen to both people on both sides, some people say, oh, Trump's just raising the prices to feed the rich. Others people say, yeah, but he kind of screwed over China and China's looking to lower prices, which will give us more better trade deals to foreign countries. You don't know who to listen to. You gotta wait till the consequences of those actions and see what really happens.
I mean, I feel
But I
like we've
can
already
see the
seen the
price.
consequence, but this isn't a political debate.
No, no, no. Of course, of course. I'm. The point is, I don't know if I'm gonna. I can't make that point or validate it because we don't know as of right now what exactly happens. Because
Right.
we can make theories, but we don't know. But I can say that at least right now, I can see the price of beef going up just for those cobalt preservatives that you get from like Haiti or where we said that they came from.
Yeah, Democratic Congo or something like that. We're pretty
Yeah,
much the same
but the
thing.
but that kind of goes into this point you brought in. What we saying Japan would have to import because if for some reason we import things, it costs more. So the
Right.
price of these other vegetables to replace these whatever they have in Japan, or just because their population's so high compared for their little island, is you're gonna make food more expensive as a whole. And that goes back to that main point I had where making everybody would go vegan in certain, at least in certain areas for sure, is gonna jack up the price of food, which will screw over the people who already can't afford food. The economy is not doing good anywhere. Japan's no exception.
Yeah, but I would have to do more research into places like Japan, for example, because I'm 90% sure you get the vast majority of beef and animal products that aren't fish from China and get that imported, which is going to be much more expensive in a vegan society than just getting imports of plants.
That could be the case. I don't know. I don't want to talk on my ass.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about my ass either, so I'm not going to assume
Yeah.
that much about how many imports you get for chicken and beef, for example.
Okay.
But I feel like, yeah,
Now
there's
I
going to be
got.
some small countries that are going to be fucked over, like in Africa especially, that if they wouldn't be able to adapt a plant-based diet as well. Sure, there's going to be some countries out there, but I still think it's doable. I don't think that a lot of people are going to die as a result.
Now I got a question for you. In
Right,
terms of debate, I believe in compromise. Where the best debates end in compromise.
right.
Would you consider like if you can't make the whole world vegan, would you consider pescatarian for the whole world? Would you say fish are the exception?
Um, like if I had to pick between that and the current society, then yeah, probably a pescatarian society.
So in a perfect world, let's say hypothetically that the whole world became pescatarian. Would you be happy with with yourself at least?
Happy.
Like would you end the cause?
And the cause as in stop advocating for vegan diets.
Yeah, well, let's say hypothetically we all give up chicken and pork and beef, and you go to like McDonald's and get a McFish fillet.
Those suck, by the way. But Yes, I
Yes.
would probably not go as hard on non-vegans because I don't feel like fish have that sort of same level of subjective experience, but I still wouldn't be as satisfied if it was a vegan society.
Yeah. Oh, I'm saying like, it might be difficult to, to quote Oscar Wilde, the two great tragedies are not getting what you want and getting what you want.
Right.
Yeah. So in the terms of like not getting both, if I was vegan, this is me personally, and I think that if the whole world went pescatarian as a bit of a compromise, I could be happy for the cause. So in this example, we're going true vegan. Maybe we got some wool ranches, etc. for clothing,
Mhm.
because you don't slaughter sheep for their wool, of course.
Yeah.
But okay, this is a note to put down in that there is compromise. Now, another point I brought up, is babies technically aren't vegan because they have to drink milk.
Well, yeah,
So
but I
would
feel
there be
like
like
breast milk is going to be consensual because the
so
idea
you
of
would
veganism is limiting the harm of sentient beings, which that's not going to violate any code and it's not going to harm any sentient beings.
okay, so and then we're gonna take things to the logical extreme for practicality. If there would people like milk, would you be okay for women selling breast milk on the side?
Mm,
I mean, the Blizzard employees found a way, so
I mean, if they wanted to, sure.
you would have no beef against it, is what I'm saying. You just wouldn't care.
Morally, no, I would think it's weird. Like, if some
Yes,
30-year-old Redditor is just buying breast milk off the web, I'd find that
you totally
weird.
know that exists. There's at least
Right,
there's at
that
least
does
one example
exist
of that for
already.
sure. Okay, okay,
I would just find it weird, but I wouldn't see a moral issue
okay.
with it.
Okay, I'm asking questions because I want to find the logical. Like I don't want to like put words in your mouth. I want to
Yeah,
look for what you what exactly are these definitions? Because right now I'm playing devil's advocate. I want to see, can this work? Can we truly make this work? And if not, let's look for the holes and then point at the holes, and that'll be my argument.
yeah.
Is
So basically
I'm
looking
trying to
for
cooperate.
inconsistencies. Hmm.
Yes, because I think that's gonna be better than like just us spewing facts at each other. It goes, well, yada yada yada. Because that's what
Yeah,
Charlie Kirk does.
exactly.
He lost that debate because he tried to use logic, and logically, I'd say you can be vegan and it can work, but you're not gonna convince that man to give up steaks.
True.
You know that man likes going to Texas Roadhouse.
Yeah, you can definitely tell.
Yeah, but
But
okay, go for it.
so do you think the harm of animals is going to be immoral?
This would go like to the abortion debate too in terms of moral versus practicality. I think yes and no to an to certain extremes. For example, I myself don't like to go hunting, but
Right.
I'm okay eating meat. I couldn't kill animal. If I had to do it to survive, I would do it without second thought. If it's me or that rabbit, you know what I'm gonna pick.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you might do the same too if it meant survival. Would you kill like a squirrel if you knew you had to do it to live?
Yeah, I would just take that as it's going to be for the greater good. Like my
Okay,
survival is
so
going to
we
be more it's going to be better overall than a squirrel's survival.
so we do have examples of eating meat is necessary. And of course very niche extreme scenarios.
Right.
Okay. So we do have that so far. Okay. So is it immoral? It's kind of difficult because yes and no. I
I
would
feel
say
like in the vast
yes.
majority of cases, like if you're going to needlessly kill an animal, would it be immoral? As in, you don't physically need it in order to survive.
So I guess in terms of like trophy hunting or like just killing for sport, absolutely that's immoral. I think it's disgusting.
Right.
Now, I think there are ways you can kill an animal or slaughter an animal in a way that's kind of good. I think organic farms are a good example. I do think like certain foods like veal, you know what veal is, right?
No, I don't.
veal is a very like a delicacy. Like it's a meat that people really really like. It's really expensive. But what a veal is, it's baby cow.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If someone came to me and said you want to try veal, I will say absolutely the fuck no, because I know that what happened. Let the cow grow up. But you could say that if an animal gets to like a certain like elderly age where they're about to die soon, would you be okay with that?
I feel like
And
if you
let's say
just let them
slaughter.
die naturally, it'd be okay to eat them. I don't feel like killing the animal and cutting its off its life. Either way is going to be a good thing.
What if
What
it
if you
was a
just
very humane way, like a very non-painful way?
even then you're just still killing it when it still has a couple of
Okay,
months left and it doesn't want to die. It wants to live as long as it
okay,
can.
okay. I don't know if like having elderly animal changes the meat, so I don't want to like say,
Oh
well,
yeah, it does.
yeah, okay, okay. So I'm trying to look for more hole. So I would say yes and no. When it goes to them, going back to the question of morality, I would say yes and no, because one, I do like meat. As someone who is a personal trainer, that protein is kind of important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
But do
okay.
you think it's physically necessary for like the average person to have to consume animal proteins?
I would say yes. For the average person, yes. As we established before, you have to kind of know what you're doing to be vegan, and there's a lot of stupid people in this world.
I feel like most
So,
people I feel like most people would be able to point out and find the difference between certain amino acids. Or they can even just get
no.
consultation from a dietitian or something like that. Really? Do you really think that the people who are studying algebra or something won't be able to understand the basic concepts of amino acids?
I'm talking your blue collar construction worker.
No, they can definitely figure it out. I feel like most people can.
You'll have a lot. Okay, okay. You'll have a lot of people who they could figure it out. It's do they want to? And
Right.
even then, you have a lot of uneducated people. People who don't go to universities, people who don't know what an amino acid is. Yeah, people who are gluten free still eating gluten
Right.
because they don't really know what gluten is. I would say for the average, let's say like uncollege educated kind of dumb person, I would say no. They will screw themselves over and have to go to the doctor. The doctor would probably have to tell them what to do, and even then, they're they might just fuck it up. And also the people who can't afford certain foods, because as I've stated, when it comes to like the B12, why is Ozempic so expensive? It's not hard to make. It's just everybody wants it, and of course, big pharma want their money.
Right.
But you know, if well, it's 340 million people needed to have this like one type of like pill to survive. That's gonna be very expensive.
Well, I'm not saying you can only get it through a pill. Like you can get it through like what do they call it? Fortified foods. Like most cereals are going to have B12 injected into them. Even like Red Bull has B12 in it.
Well, that's hilarious. Actually, I didn't know that one.
Yeah, that's where I get my main source of B12 from. Yeah, but anyways, I was going to talk about this one point that you made that I thought was like, So it was after what you were talking about with efficiency for the people and the people being too stupid. Uh,
Okay, go for it.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, so I think it's going to be a problem I take with issue is the idea that just because people are too stupid to understand it means it's physically necessary for them to eat meat. Because nutritionally, do you have like an objection to them being on a vegan diet? Like, is there any nutrients they wouldn't be able to obtain?
No, I think it's possible from a personal trainer's point of view who studies a little bit of nutrition. I believe it can be done with a vegan diet.
Okay, so I guess we're on the same page with that one. I feel like stupidity is not going to be able to be a good point for when it comes to abusing animals, you should be able to do your own research. Most of these people do have the IQ necessary in order to figure out different amino acids and things like that. There's definitely going to be some people who are just going to fall into a trap and not be able to get out. And there's going to probably be a couple of deaths as a result of vegan diets. But I don't feel like that's going to be, uh, that's not going to, how do I phrase this? It's not going to be as bad as the disutility caused from the animals suffering in a non-vegan society. And also the point you were talking about right after that was it's going to cost more in order for people to be afford the B12 supplements and stuff like that. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case because in order to buy meat, that's going to cost a lot more. So just being vegan and also buying the pills is not going to be as expensive. But that's all I want to say.
Okay. So in terms of that, it's not that so I mean meat's not that expensive. Pork is, which I'm not too sure why. I do know that beef is generally not as expensive. But if you have a monopoly on anything, now like you can have those fortified supplements because again, it has to come from an outside source. This fortified supplement.
Right.
Someone has to produce the B12. Someone
Right.
or someones. If it's one person doing it, so going for practicality, if it's one, and I use all of ifs because we don't live in a society. And we have to look for I'm looking for the holes. But if one person's the one who sells it all, then that person controls the price. And insulin, when you have like a life tax, big pharma or those people like to get as much as they can. Insulin is crazy expensive. So people who are diabetes have a very expensive life tax. Now, do we
Yeah.
think this would apply to everyone? This if everyone uses these B12 supplements.
No, because once again, you can get the supplements in other forms like fortified foods, which the vast majority of people do eat fortified foods that have B12 within them. But then, once again, it's just going to be the same process in order to fortify these foods. It's just going to be synthesized B12. It's not going to be
Okay.
like cobalt or anything like that.
Okay. So I guess in the hypothetical, we have the technology. We did not have it back then, but we have it now. And if not, the pescatarian compromise would suffice for at least some places. Now, what about people who live in say like Texas, Mexico, Canada, where the environment to grow lots of vegetables is not ideal?
Well, yeah, but once again, this is just going to go back to the point that most of the vegetables that are grown have to be fed to the animals in the first place.
Yeah, well,
So
I mean,
then
they
eating meat wouldn't
typically.
make any sense as an alternative.
Well,
Because if
okay, so in
society
the
has a
Middle East,
limited amount of sources in order to grow plants, then eating meat is going to be incredibly inefficient for them. What was that about the Middle East?
yeah, yeah. So in the Middle East, they eat camel, which honestly just boggles my mind because I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a camel is adapted to live in the desert, so you don't really need to import certain crops because camels can store water for long periods of time. But at least in the Middle East specifically, they have the meat they eat can survive in the desert. They don't need to import. They are already a self-sustaining society and have been for thousands of years. This is all around the world. We
Right.
have had meats and vegetables with very limited trade all over the world. Otherwise, those places would be extinct of humans.
Yeah.
So we don't need to import certain foods or like vegetables for animals.
Mm-hmm.
But oh god, I hear that violin.
Yeah. Someone in the background.
You're good. But let's for example they want to like raise cattle in the Middle East, like just they're having big beef ranches in the Middle East. They probably would have to import alfalfa and some hay that they wouldn't otherwise.
Right.
So the society has already accounted for. We can grow meat and give them like the slop. Again, we fed horses hay, which is utterly useless to humans, except for like I don't know, making straw hats.
Yeah. So
So
basically, what you're saying is there's going to be other alternatives that us humans won't be able to eat that are given to things like camels and horses, which would be able to produce meat and stuff for us. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
and of course, like yeah, and so like people like in the desert, the Middle East, they would not survive on a vegan diet in the Middle East. It's too hot there. It's too sandy.
Right.
Anakin Skywalker had a point.
Yeah, but the thing is, the camels have to eat some sort of source of nutrition, right? I'm not thinking
Yeah,
only drinking water and things like that. I wonder what it is.
yeah.
I have no clue what it is, but I
You know
feel
what?
like
Let's
with
look it
these
up real
societies,
quick.
yeah, it's probably going to be the best thing because I have no clue. What do camels? Hay, dried leaves, fruits, twigs, wheat. I
Shrubbery.
could probably
Okay.
look into camel farms, Middle East.
So they're grazers, is what it means. It means they'll eat your lawn. You
Right,
don't need to grow your lawn. They will just eat it. So in the Middle East, where they do eat camels, it's not a. You don't have to grow a farm to have camels. You just have to have land that has shrubbery to grow camels, or to raise
right.
camels. So, in that example, we can't really grow all the because you have to be very picky, choosy. You need to have a wide variety of vegetables to have the complete proteins, which the Middle East would not be able to do unless they imported all of it.
Mm, I feel like if you're really, really going to go like to that point specifically, I feel like it's possible for the Middle East to not have that many imports because at the end of the day, it only takes about like 4 foods in order to have an adequate amount of nutrition, micros, macros, and other things like that in order to be
True,
vegan.
but on paper versus practicality, do you think people in the Middle East are gonna just live off 4 vegetables a day?
No, because I feel like that would suck ass.
Yes, it would suck ass. That is the hardest part you're gonna try to sell people on how to be vegan. Is that
Yeah.
can it be done? Yes. Is it gonna suck for most people? Absolutely. Because Japan has to be pescatarian. The Middle East, well, when you live in the desert, you're very limited, and you can say the same for like Canadians. I mean, they when it's cold as fuck. I have lived in a cold as fuck place. You can't grow too much there, or you're limited to grow. So for Russia, for example, vodka is like the racial stereotype because they have a lot of potatoes. Same with
Right.
Ireland. What do Russia and Ireland have in common? It's very cold in those places. So the potatoes can work, but potatoes don't have all your essential vitamins.
Right. So they can still
So
grow other things in Russia. And they still eat a
yeah,
lot of meat in Russia, if I remember correctly.
yes, because they don't have the suitable land to grow most of their foods or like most vegetables.
Yeah, but this
If we're
just goes
talking
back to.
like
Go ahead.
go for it. I was like, so I was say if we're talking like in like say Tennessee, Kentucky, very temperate, very good agricultural like places. Can they be vegan and be happy? I think absolutely. But it's when if we're looking for everybody, trying to count for all the peoples, we see Japan can't do it. The Middle East can't do it.
Are you saying that they can't be
Russia,
vegan and happy, or are you saying that they don't have the ability to be vegan?
I would say without too much trade, I'm looking for self-sustaining. Because Trump and his tariffs, if anything goes wrong, your whole society like crumbles.
Mm-hmm.
The Irish potato famine, for example, when all the potatoes died, the Irish people starved to death.
Right.
So I don't know how they got out of the potato famine. I don't know much of the history. I just know that it happened. But to avoid famines is where my point was. To have a full vegan society, you would probably kill millions of people in the process because you're gonna have
Millions is a
famines.
stretch. Well, yeah, but once again, the famine's probably going to be caused because most of these people that are consuming certain things, like potatoes, for example, also are consuming meat, which the meat requires them to feed the potatoes to their like cows and livestock and stuff like that. Also, another point I was
Yeah.
going to make is that are these societies going to be happy? They're going to have limited trade. Yeah, sure, they're going to have limited trade, but I feel like they're going to expand the scope of their trade in their entire country if they decide to go vegan.
Okay, so we're going with if, where we're not playing dictators of the world, where we say it must be done.
Yeah.
Just
I'm
real
not
quick.
saying that we
Okay.
have to force the entire world to go vegan. I'd say it's going to be more efficient on a societal level if the entire world went vegan. Like
Okay.
considering
Now,
every single aspect of it, it's going to be more efficient for a society, all of society to go vegan. Yeah, there's going to be problems, and we would have to assume certain things like the Middle East was going to import more of their stuff, which they already do. They already rich enough. Like holy shit, the royal families have like every single thing they need. They can easily import a couple of more veggies into their societies.
yeah, I saw like videos of that guy having a pet tigers, and I god damn, I want a pet tiger.
Yeah, me
That's the
too.
coolest shit ever.
For real.
Well, okay, if you're vegan, then no, you wouldn't. That tiger ain't being vegan. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that one for sure.
True.
But no, actually, just go back to like a point I made like a while ago. Like, so cow. So you're saying like we need to import certain foods for cows. We don't necessarily do that. Certain like proteins, certain vitamins would be good, but cows are generally grazers. What makes cow such a great livestock animals is because they just eat what's on the floor. Cow, when they eat your lawn and your lawn just replaces itself, you just got to put cow in a pen, and cow can survive in that pen. Maybe not the happiest, but it can thrive. It can survive. You don't have to go through any extra hoops unless you want to make your cows a lot happier than they need to be. You could, in a practical society, let's say just, really, really shitty conditions. Have a cow on lawn in a small spin with a bunch of other cow and have it work. People do that, which
Yeah.
I'm against that. Let's say I'm in for organic farms. I just wish they were cheaper.
Hmm.
From a moral standpoint, practicality wise, I just buy meat at the grocery store.
Yeah, like on an individual scope. But I feel like on a societal scope, it's still going to be more efficient for the entire world to go vegan. And about the imports with cows, the cows are just going to be able to survive and be self-sufficient. That's not what the majority of cows do in these certain countries. Like Japan, for example, they're still going to eat the vast majority. They're still going to eat a pretty healthy diet in general. They're still going to eat
Well, they
corn,
need
soy,
food,
and
of
things like that,
course.
and grains and hay, which all need to be grown in the first place. Have to have an adequate
Wait,
amount of water. Have to have adequate enough of care and land, of course. So
wait,
I
the
feel like
Japanese
the
don't need
vast
hay.
majority of people
Hold
are
on
not
about that
just.
one.
Okay, sorry, but
Yeah,
all right, go ahead.
go for it. No, no, okay, okay, okay. So,
I pretty much
you're
did.
trying to say like, okay, okay. So, you're gonna say, well, we can slow down. Okay. Do you think that countries should be self-sufficient?
Do I think
That
countries should be self-sufficient?
yeah,
Yes,
that
as
we
a general principle, it would be better if they were self-sufficient.
okay. Do you think that they should be? Not as a but do you think that
Just
a
morally,
country should be not morally, just from a structurally,
structurally, should they be self-sufficient?
as in they can survive without trade with anyone? That you trade for luxuries, not for necessities.
Mm, I guess.
Well, yeah, yes or no? What's the answer?
I feel like in certain contexts, yes, certain contexts, no.
Okay. I'd say when it comes to say food and electricity, I'm trying to think what else that is absolutely necessary in our modern society. Clothing. Well, you can make cheap clothing. I'd say food and electricity are the two big, and of course, like water. Okay, going back to that Middle East point. If they have to import food to meet their diet quota, are they self-sufficient? Meaning, if Saudi Arabia went to war against the whole world for whatever reason, or they were embargoed, would the Saudi people survive?
Probably not. But I don't feel like being self-sufficient is necessarily some sort of property that they have to have. And like in most scenarios, they're not going to need to be self-sufficient. Sure, it would be better if they didn't have to have some imports for the things that they need that are necessary for them, but I don't feel like it's something they should or should not do because I feel like should and should not kind of gets into the moral philosophy of it.
I would say every country should be self-sufficient in terms of basic human survival. Because if anything goes wrong, like a potato famine, you have millions of deaths going on. Now, the potato famine wasn't necessarily like an embargo issue, that was a disease issue. But if using our what we have today, the Ukraine-Russian war, the all the Russian natural resources kaput, not being traded. As a result, gas prices skyrocketed, which also made food more expensive because the trucks have to, move the food. All of that is to say that we had a society where we thought we'd be fine with just cheap gas, and then when push came to shove, people aren't starving on the streets, but it definitely took a huge toll on the people. And to avoid that, to have a thriving nation, you have to be able to cut off trade from someone and still thrive and survive. Now, there's a whole green energy argument in that case, but I would say it would be morally wrong to make every country depend on big agricultural nations. If you ask the people of those nations, they would absolutely agree with you because they're benefiting. But the people in Saudi Arabia, who would be a little on edge, they in a way would be pressured to agree with with all the agricultural nations. They would have the most power in the world because if you make them mad, your people starve to death. So this from a geopolitical standpoint. Do you think
Right.
that would cause issues?
Yeah,
Like
sure, it would cause
from a
issues, but I feel like the issues are still going to be present even if they weren't self-sufficient. Because I feel like famines, like the potato famine, for example, still affected their home country.
yeah, well, make it, that was I believe that was a disease in the potatoes issue, not
Right.
not not a trade issue. But the point I'm making is when you
Oh
cut
my
off a major
god.
food supply that is essential, the people die,
Right. But I feel like that's
and they die a
I
lot.
feel like that's not going to happen in the Middle East and Japan specifically because as we said earlier, the people still can grow their own crops, but it's just going to be like 3 or 4 vegetables and plant-based things. And that's
I'd
not
say
going to lead to happiness. Japan still
I'd
has
say
the ability to
Japan.
grow these things for a society. I feel like that would be the case.
I'd say Japan can't do it just because it's very urbanized. There's a
Mm,
lot of city in that on that island. As someone who lives here, there's a whole lot of buildings, a whole lot of concrete.
I feel like I'd have to look into more about Japan specifically, but I guess I'll just
Oh,
take your
come
word
check.
on it.
Oh, come check this shit out. If you ever come visit, let me know. I'll show you around. Place is great. Well, Japan has its own issues, but that's a different conversation. But I would say that there's if you want to like let's say you want to screw over Japan and let's say they go full vegan, no pescatarian, in that they have to import a lot of their foods. All it takes is one trade blockade, let's say from China, and then the people starve.
Yeah, I feel like
Point
there's still
is,
going to be inevitable deaths. Yeah, that's going to be a
yeah.
problem with the vegan society, but at the same time, I don't feel like that is going to be a likely scenario. And if it did happen, that's probably going to suck. But I feel like a non-vegan society in general would face some of the same issues, and it would be significantly worse for them. I'm not saying the vegan
So
society is going to be the perfect society.
yeah. So I would say in the non-vegan society, if you put if you put like warships around Japan, aside from one, people are gonna ask what the fuck you do in China. One, where two, where's my anime? And three, they could still survive because they're gonna still eat the nearby fish. They're gonna be very, the people will be on edge. For don't get me wrong, but they could survive a blockade at least for a good while. If they were vegan and the blockade was there, their days would be numbered for
Right.
sure. So these are the problems of this society. When for your society to work, we have to have a lot of trade. This requires everyone to be friends with each other. And
Mm-hmm.
in a perfect world, let's say in a perfect world, I could say we could totally have a vegan society. It could totally be functional, and no problems could happen. But a lot of this is going to, as we've said before, the Middle East can't do it. Russia in like very like colder nations can't do it. Island nations, Fiji, Hawaii as well. And Hawaii, by the way, food is expensive in Hawaii. If it's not pineapples
Mm-hmm.
and coconuts, that's why Hawaii is like a very luxurious place,
Yeah,
and they have a very small population. Food is out. Anything imported is outrageously expensive
for
because
sure.
again, it's got to go across that big ass ocean. But in a vegan society, they're fucked too. So at least we have three major biomes: the desert, the tundra, and islands. So like
Mm-hmm.
plains, forests, maybe rainforests. I don't know about rainforests because most people don't really live in much rainforest anyways. But in the middles, in between the equators, not like between the poles and the equators, you're totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
So for this idea to work, and it is they're sort of seeing the holes already, is because people go to war and nations compete with each other, and it gives some nations a very strong advantage over others. China, for example, could totally survive a vegan diet. Now, the people would bitch and moan for sure, because in China, I've been to China
Yeah.
too,
Respond to
especially
Gavin
southern
Outland's
China.
latest
You know,
video on
there's a joke saying
A
like,
maintenance
if an alien visits Beijing, they're gonna like celebrate it and parade it around, take it to Congress. If an alien goes to Shanghai, they're gonna put it in a museum. If an alien goes to Guangzhou, southern China, they're gonna learn how to eat it. Because in southern China, they eat everything. You know, cats and dogs. Yeah, yeah, that's where that
Yeah.
meme comes from. So the
Right.
people would bitch and moan for sure, but I could say China has many diverse biomes. Like they could grow a variety of vegetables and make the people survive and thrive. They have the upper hand in this game of world chess.
Right. Yeah, but I feel
Now,
like there's just going to be so many assumptions within this sort of hypothetical that, oh, China might cut off Japan from the trade. Oh, there are certain scenarios in which they certain societies wouldn't be able to survive if they weren't self-sufficient and if they were vegan. But I feel like the point I'm trying to get across is that if society were to be vegan rather than non-vegan, it would function at a more efficient level. I'm not saying that it's
I
going to
would
be perfect. Like even in a perfect society, it would still um, be better if they were vegan. Well, I'm saying
I
like
would
at
say
the
we have
current
to
state, it would
yeah.
be better if they
I
were
would
vegan.
say from a geopolitical from someone who studies geopolitics, which is my major in college, you do have to look at all these what if scenarios because that can really define what kills people, what makes people not be killed. In that is sort of how the politics comes into play. I will concede to the point you are absolutely correct. If society was
What's the
perfect,
dis-
if there were no wars, in a perfect utopia, I think it can be done. I think logically, I think philosophically, if we had open trade with every nation, I think it's totally possible. I still think people wouldn't do it. You'd have to really really convince them to do it. But if you cut off all the meat in
Why
the
don't you
world
understand the difference
and
between a
outlawed
dispute?
it in a perfect society, I think people
Hard.
could still
Guys, she
thrive,
strawmanned him
and you
now
have
for
a lot
the
of chefs
third
trying
time, and
to
I'm
figure
being
out how to do
nice.
the fake meat. But in the real world, the on paper, or because practicality, on paper versus in practice, we've
conservative
seen
hate
what
crime. Like
nations
she's
do,
done that at least 6 times.
like China, for example, Russia. You know,
What I mean,
when war
yeah,
comes,
what I mean is like
comes
when
down,
you descript it, so
and
we can
when
determine
it
if
comes
it's
down, I'm not
tribalism or
saying
not, if it's
if,
veganism or not
because
tribalism, to have collectivism
war
or
is
what does it say?
inevitable until we find a way to make everybody happy. That you're going to have lots of problems and lots of like civilian casualties because of famine. If not now, you would have to say in those scenarios that, well, in times of war, you gotta do what you gotta do, eat meat.
You got a big
But
dick
in a
for
vegan
me?
society, we'd probably have gotten rid of all those animal farms because if we're not
Bro, no
using
one
like
likes
the
cartoons
beef
anymore, bro.
ranches to as a worst case scenario, why are we gonna have the beef ranches at all? You're not gonna just grow them for maybe we might need it. You grow it if you need it. But what is your answer for when shit gets bad? What do we do?
If shit gets bad, what do we do? I feel like if it is necessary for them to eat meat, go ahead. I mean,
Okay.
if that's a scenario you're putting forward that they can only survive if they eat the fish off their islands, go ahead. I mean, I feel like this is just
Okay.
going to be the island stranded scenario or some sort of scenario in which you're in the wild and you're starving to death and the only thing around you are rabbits. If you need to, like in this desperate moment of time, then don't go vegan. But I feel like the vast majority of time that it's going to be better for societies to go vegan. And I feel like the vast majority of issues you're bringing up in regards to free trade and geopolitical scales, vast majority of them are going to be worse in a non-vegan society than a vegan society when it comes to famine due to imports and stuff like that.
Okay. But if that's what we're defining, and of course, I think we should agree that every nation should be, to an extent, self-sufficient. to at least produce your bare necessities and to survive without need of any foreign aid. Happy is a very subjective term. I'm just saying survive.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Feel
in
like if I
that
need to
case,
survive, then yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like this.
okay,
Yeah, so I have to go, but productive conversation. Maybe we can have another conversation later on. I'll
yeah,
probably upload this, probably do minimal editing because it's like an hour. But thanks,
oh
man.
yeah, I will say real quick, I do think that just the final point. I think that in theory it can be done, but I think from a geopolitical, from certain like environmental factors, I would say the vegan society, the way the world is now, cannot function. That isn't to say that we can't progress to it. I'm just saying if you did it overnight, or even like within 100 years, I would say I don't think we could do it.
Yeah, I agree because it would be hard to convince people. Even maybe we could do it in a manner, but I feel like the ideals a vegan
Okay.
society would be more efficient. I feel like that's what the commenting was about. But that was great. Thank you. You
Yeah.
actually backed
Yeah. I'm glad.
you actually backed your comments, and definitely
I'm
go
not a
for that.
pussy, dude.
Yeah.
And